BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
You're about to listen to another episode of the food programme. Episodes will be released weekly wherever you get your podcasts. But if you're in the UK, you can listen to the latest episodes a whole week earlier than anywhere else. First on BBC Sounds. We're in Copenhagen again in this edition of the food programme, and I'm learning a few things about how policy set from on high can, in a country that takes food seriously and with pleasure, change people's lives. This is a story about a country that's very pro-organic, or so says Organic Denmark, one of the country's biggest organic food industry associations. In 2023, almost 12% of the food Danes bought was organically produced. In the UK, it's 1.5%. Is it just another of those Scandi things like Hygge and Tele Noir? Unsurprisingly, those organic figures are not accidental. So, as the world struggles with climate change, food security, and a marketplace awash with ultra-processed foods, how have they done it?
Denmark is such an adaptable country. Every time an industry disappears, we come up with something new.
The one Danish food most of us know is their bacon, cleverly branded, exported big scale all over Europe, and mostly produced on factory farms. The other thing spread far and wide is the reputation of its restaurants, cafes and bakeries. From Noma, said to be the best restaurant in the world in various lists, though now closed, except as a food lab and an occasional pop-up, down to the little booth in a food court opposite our railway hotel, where producer Natalie Donovan and I ate the best pickled herring on the best rye bread for about £4 each. So how do these three things, great food, industrially produced bacon and organic food, connect? Is there, in fact, any connection?
Aha! I'm sorry we're late.
Someone who's been part of Copenhagen's food culture for a long time is chef and food writer Trine Hahnemann. Her book, Copenhagen Food, is indispensable if you want to understand and enjoy Danish food.
This is the Rundetårn, which is the tower that Christian IV built, so he could take his horses all the way up to the top and see the stars, because he didn't want to walk. There's no stairs. You walk up there without stairs.
We've interviewed Trine several times on the food programme, but we've never met on her home turf. As well as cooking and writing about food, she used to run a large catering company here in Copenhagen and often sits on several of the government's food and agriculture advisory boards. We've arranged to meet at one of Copenhagen's key tourist sites, the 7-story high red and yellow brick tower, known in English as the Round Tower, finished in 1642. It's a grand building, but we've come for something a bit less historical, but still very Danish.
So this is the famous hot dog stand. I'm not completely sure how long it's been this organic one. There's always been one here.
So it's not just a fly-by-night fashionable thing?
No.
The organicness, I mean.
No. The organic movement really took off. It started in the 70s and grew in the 80s, and then in the 90s it really took off.
The hot dog company, Doip, has been around since 2009.
I will say that every Dane has their way to put their hot dog together. Here it says ketchup, mustard, remoulade, sweet and sour cucumber salad, and raw and fried onions. I mean, I have not remoulade and not raw onions, but all the other things. That's my way.
My way? Well, traditional with all the toppings.
Okay, you want the whole shebang.
Yeah. It will be a mess when I eat it, won't it? Yeah.
That's the whole point. But it's so satisfying. I mean, I think this is the best street food in the world. And now we can get it organic, then I can have it even more often. En til ristet, yes please, and I will have... A lot of these companies were farmers who had ideals. And since agriculture in Denmark was so big ag quite fast, in the 80s and the 90s, they started wanting to do small production. And for some reason, all of that more or less became organic. Whereas other countries, it's more like, this is local food. We don't have local food that's not organic, very, very little.
Interesting that it would do it, for a very, pop way. I mean, organic in Britain has tended to, just go to the high end.
One of the reasons why some of the fast food has become organic and popular with the young people is because the big festival, Roskilde Festival, that's like Glastonbury, they made measures about sustainability and organic many years ago. So if you wanted to be a provider there, you had to live up to all these kind of standards.
In 2017, the Roskilde Festival announced that all food traders on site had to be at least 90% organic.
That then became a playground for people to try it out because they wanted to be at Roskilde because there's a huge ocean, right? So these little festival things, and now there's Northside, which is hard rock, they went vegetarian. Things like that drives it.
I can't believe how good this is.
Oh.
They're enjoying it too. He's bringing the coffee over. Well, we've had our hot dogs and we've moved to the Coffee Collective, which is a coffee shop 10 minutes away with Trine, because it was a bit cold standing out there. Yeah. Tell me about what role government policy played in this rise of organics in Denmark. I mean, in terms of sourcing and public procurement.
The government did not. It was the councils.
City councils.
City councils, yeah. So the thing was that in the early 10s, we had an agriculture minister called Ritt Bjerregaard.
Ritt Bjerregaard was a member of the Danish Social Democrats.
She understood food. And she had an apple orchard and was part of a government who tried to do this as a policy and make something they called the food house, where farmers and chefs should meet and collaborate, and there should be signs and so on and on. Then we got a right-wing or right-wing government. They took that project down right away when they were elected, and it wasn't built yet. And very short time after, she became the mayor of Copenhagen, and then she did it for Copenhagen.
In 2007, Ritt Bjerregaard set up an organization called the Copenhagen House of Food, the first of its kind, aiming to increase the quality of meals in the city. A key part of that quality was that the ingredients were organically produced.
Their first thing was to, in 10 years, make sure that all public meals in Copenhagen became 90% organic. And these political decisions are drivers, because then people start growing more things and we start buying more things, and therefore policies are really, really important. And we did that. We got up to the 90%. I was in this journey because I had lots of canteens and I did a lot of teaching. How do you do that? And we had to do it without it costing more.
How do you do that?
You cut down on meat, you cut down on cheese, you cut down on cold cuts, you processed food out. And then you do a lot of lentils and a lot of vegetables. You bake your own bread. You start cooking.
And how did the customers, the people in the hospitals, the children, the care homes, the canteens, how did they react to a lentil-based, plant-heavy diet?
What I learned very quickly, if I did lots of bean salads or bean soup, if I sprinkled a little bacon on it, they would all eat it. So, it was more about thinking about how can I cut down the amount in every day. So everybody would maybe having 150 grams of meat in a meal, cut it down to 60. And then the next step is to take one day out. But you have to do these things slowly. And then, of course, it has to taste delicious. Because if it doesn't taste good, nobody's going to eat it anyway. Also make sure it's not all brown, Make sure there's some colors in there. The other thing is seasonality. Buy things locally when they are not too expensive. And then don't be afraid of cook the same every day. You can cook celeriac and beetroot every day, but you can take in the whole world and do it in the Mexican way or in Danish way or the Italian way with the same ingredients.
Trine Hahnemann telling a story of how you take even the very reluctant on a food journey. The food needs to taste and look delicious. Good cooks need to make it, and to keep the price down, you need to use less meat and food that's in season. By 2015 in Copenhagen, 88% of the food cooked in the city's public kitchens was organic, and the Copenhagen House of Food was supporting authorities all over the country to increase the amount of organic meals on offer. Now, we've come to a big kitchen supplying the young public to find out.
Well, it's always been a public kitchen. This specific part of Copenhagen or Nørrebro is called, as I mentioned, City of the Elderly. And it's always been this...
Søren Bull-Steinecker is a chef with years of restaurant experience. He now runs Eat, owned by the Municipal Council, making lunches for 50 schools in the city that don't have their own kitchens. Between 90 and 100% of the ingredients are from organic producers. That's part of the contract based on the city's food strategy.
We want to cook everything ourselves, so we almost don't use any ultra-processed products, and therefore we cook everything ourselves from scratch.
And how easy is it to get 90% organic?
It's doable now, definitely. When we started, it was much harder because the organic suppliers weren't really ready to meet our demands. But we've been developing over the years a very close relationship to our suppliers. So every time that we create a new menu, we deliver a forecast. In that way, they can make sure that they've got everything ready to be delivered for us. So we can do it.
We've just walked into a big industrial kitchen, a vast place.
This is our bakery. We built that around 10 or 11 years ago, and all bread is made from here, yeah.
How many meals per day do you make here?
We cook around 6,000 to 7,000 meals a day.
The food cooked in the Eat kitchen is chilled and delivered to schools the next day. There it's reheated and served with more food, salads, pastas, potatoes, green veg, that need to be freshly made in the small prep kitchens within each school. The children or their parents choose what they want to eat in advance from a short online menu. The tradition in Denmark has always been for children to bring food from home. So over a week in Copenhagen, about 50% of the children will eat school meals that costs them about £2.50.
The municipality subsidizes with maybe €2 per portion, and then the consumer pays €3 per portion. And that's the actual cost for the meal.
What about if you can't afford €3?
There are programs for families with lower incomes. Some get the food for free, and some get it at a reduced price. This program is also a way to make sure that there are equal possibilities for every kid. Everybody should have a nice, healthy meal so that they're ready and able to learn stuff when they go to school. So that social aspect of it is also extremely important.
Part of the school food ethos in Copenhagen is getting the children involved. They help develop the menus, they take part in tastings, and before lunch, they're the ones setting out the food on plates.
Food has no value if it isn't eaten. So of course we focus a lot on the taste. We also focus on the dietary guidelines. So we cook healthy food, but you can easily cook healthy and delicious food. We also serve mini pizzas. People might say that that's not healthy food, but of course it is. We use organic local flour, we use organic mozzarella, we cook everything ourselves so we know that how much sugar is in, how much salt is in. So of course that's not a bad thing. I mean, pizzas can be very wonderful. This is what I would characterize as the heart of the kitchen. This is where we do all the vegetable preparation. Vegetables are of course the most important part of our meals, and we try to minimize how much meat that we use every single day. So it gets less and less and less. And actually in this part of the municipality, we're not allowed to use red meat anymore. So there's no beef or no lamb on the menu at all.
What's wrong with red meat?
Nothing if you ask me, but if you ask the politicians who decided it, it's because of the climate impact. So we're trying to give them healthier habits for their own sake, but also for the environment. So we try to make the climate impact as low as we can.
But what about food miles? Because the organic chicken legs we saw being prepared were from Germany.
These are, for instance, Danish mushrooms. We can't decide in this kitchen exactly which suppliers that we're going to use, because we have to use the ones that have won the public tender. But when we do the procurement, we try to encourage suppliers to give us locally produced stuff.
Denmark is a great producer of industrial pork. Do you serve pork at all?
Yeah, but only organic pork.
It's outdoor pork.
Yeah, we don't use any meat at all that's not organic. And actually that's also why this is my personal point of view, but I don't think that it's a good idea that we don't serve red meat at all, because actually we should promote the organic production of red meat. It's an integrated part of food production, so I think that's wrong, but of course we do it, we're told to do it. So we don't use red meat, we use organic pork.
Søren Bull-Steinecker from Eat. That ambition for quality and taste is impressive, even putting organic to the side. There's a strong feeling amongst people I've been meeting in the city, as you may have heard in our first Copenhagen programme on communal dining, now on BBC Sounds, that good, delicious food really matters. It was after an interview for that first programme, walking back from our communal evening meal at the co-housing development. That's the place where when you buy a flat or a house, you sign up to cook as part of a team for all the residents once every 8 weeks, that we dropped into a supermarket, and not a swish one, to see if what was on offer there reflected that food matters feeling.
Organic apples, cucumber, tomatoes, potatoes, celery, carrots. Well, we can price compare, can't we? Choose a vegetable. Carrots, okay.
This is not organic.
Not organic, but it is Danish. And they're 11 krona for a kilo. And same amount here is 8. Well, that's interesting. Non-organic is more expensive. Oh, there's a lot more here.
A lot more organic.
A lot more organic. That is seriously more than you would ever see in even a big London supermarket. But where do they all come from? This is from Italy, rocket from Italy. Iceberg lettuce from EU. That makes it.
I think it's Danish.
It's Danish. Yeah.
And I think this one is Spanish crackers.
Well, so as far as fresh fruit and veg goes, there's a lot of it. I'm just going to go and look at butter and cheese.
Most dairy products were organic. In fact, non-organic milk was hard to find. Prices were only a little higher than conventionally produced food, which is very different from the UK, where the explanation for higher prices is that organic is more labour-intensive and yields are lower. Why doesn't that apply in Denmark?
In Denmark, being a big market for organic, of course, we also have like a low-end organic and we have a high-end organic and we have the in-between organic.
Trine Krebs is an organic farmer, cook and campaigner.
In other countries, organic is partly a high-end product, but the way it happened in Denmark, we have a big range of qualities in organic.
So what we saw in the supermarket last night was the prices reflected the fact that it's done on a big scale, that it's packed on a big scale, that it's given shelf life by washing and so on. Is that what
totally
it is?
Correct? Yeah. We say in the big scale production, we're just happy about not using pesticides, not using artificial fertilizers. That's the minimum. And then we have the high end where we have all the things about taste and social responsibility and extraordinary animal welfare. So top organic, that's really pushing the Danish organic labeling, pushing the politicians. And then we have the discount organic that is like, okay, you're pulling out there in the top and we're just like following.
I'm with Trine at Copenhagen's Hospitality College. We've just had a very good lunch at the college restaurant, cooked and served by students.
They have a very strong green vision here. So we eat green here. So us having meat today is exceptional. We only have meat once a week.
But it was organic meat.
This was an organic meat, yeah. Organic meal, actually.
Trine has an office at the college as the food organisation of Denmark's Green Chef. The food organisation is a non-profit which, it says, and I quote, works to nurture interest in Danish gastronomy, nature, agriculture and culinary culture. They look particularly at how to make plants more central to Danish eating. A new movement that has its roots back in the birth of Danish organics.
How it all began in Denmark is an interesting cultural mixture. There was a lot of groups in the 70s working new ways of farming. So there was a group that was inspired by the Russian way of sovkhoz and kolkhoz, making big commune farms using Russian tractors and things. They were a fraction in that movement. There was a fraction being biodynamic. There was a fraction about being concerned about the environment. And a lot of fractions, actually, they wanted to make something in common. And a very important place in this is this co-housing Svanholm, where a lot of hippies moved out and bought a castle and wanted to make a new way of farming. They saw that they had to come out in the shops. They also have to sell it. So they invited the biggest supermarket chain in Denmark to come to a meeting at Svanholm, at this co-housing. And they had a meeting with these suit and tie guys and all the hippies sitting around on the floor and the tie guys on a chair. And they actually agreed that it was important that organic food was available for Danes in the supermarkets. So that's how it really began on a big wave. And in the same time, there was a political agreement from left wings and liberals in our parliament that they wanted to support this movement in making a statal controlled labeling on organic food.
Which is how Denmark in 1990 became the first government in the world to implement state-controlled organic produce. 6 years later, they created another organic marker for meals eaten outside the home.
In 1996, we got the food label. So you can say, my meal is 30% organic, my meal is 60% organic, then you got the silver, and it's 90% organic, you got the gold. This label is used in public kitchens and in restaurants and all kinds of kitchens. 2,000 kitchens now in all Denmark is certified in some way of organic and also controlled by the state.
The government's role in this is important because Danish farmers don't have to pay to be certified as organic, unlike in the UK, where the big certifiers are a charity and a public interest company reliant on fees for their existence. But for all that, Denmark still depends heavily on imported organic food.
That's one of the big challenges being Danish, because we are so rich, we pay a lot of taxes, and we have the most harshest environmental and tax system, and that means we also have high salaries. So we have a very hard time competing with produce coming in from even Holland and Germany. We are trying to develop the legume industry in Denmark, and though we're trying to be efficient and we have the machinery, we have the soil and everything, the price is like 20 to 20% higher than the global legume price. And that's really a hard one to solve.
But food life moves on. Getting people to eat less meat and more vegetables, including beans and lentils, is what's now risen up the Danish government's agenda. You heard earlier what that means in Copenhagen's central school meals kitchen: no red meat. Last year, the government signed a green tripartite agreement, legislation focused on climate change, biodiversity, and environmental sustainability, which is something Trine is working on.
We are using a lot of money to inspire Danes to eat more plants and also to inspire the farmers to produce more plants. Yeah, we have a fund and we have active politics and programs and everything.
What about the new programs here for vegan and vegetarian food?
So yeah, here at the hospitality school in Copenhagen, there's a program now training green chefs. And that's the first program in Denmark where you can actually take an education and being trained as a green chef. So normally you cannot be a chef without being in a restaurant serving meat. So that's quite new happening here right now.
And many people signing up for it.
Yeah, it's oversigned. We have had like 2 teams now, and they have been oversigned, both of them, like with. It's 24 people. It's not like a revolution or something. But what's funny about it is that the people signing up is actually older than the normal pupil at the hospitality school. So they are actually also academics coming in that wants to do something for the climate, but they really don't think they can change anything in the academia. So they think, if I can cook, I can change something.
But it's a land of people who have loved to eat meat, isn't it?
I think it's obvious that we are a northern, harsh agricultural country. And that means meat and dairy production is surviving the winter. And that's so much in our souls and in our culture. I think we really should acknowledge that as a cultural fact.
Trine Krebs, official green chef at the Food Organization of Denmark, organic farmer and campaigner. In another part of the city, this question of how to get people eating more plants is the focus of Ole Moritson's research. He's professor of gastrophysics and culinary food innovation at the University of Copenhagen.
We can talk a lot about the green transition and eating more green, but there's no food that is neither tasty or sustainable before it's eaten. I mean, it has to be eaten, and this is where taste comes in.
Professor Moritson believes pleasure needs to be the focus if you want to change people's eating habits.
I think it's because the government don't want to tell people what they like. They usually confuse taste with taste preferences. And taste preference you're not going to talk about because that's very individual. But there's something about the basic taste that some we like and some we dislike. When you tell people to eat more green, what you're getting there are mostly no sweetness, no umami, and on top of that bitterness. But what's in my genes, and it's also in your genes, we all have the same genes basically, that tells us to go for something that has been good for us during evolution. And one thing is calories. So we are seeking something that is sweet because it signals sugars. That's good for evolution. And the other thing that we also crave to get something that signals nutrients, proteins, and also calories. And then that's the umami receptor.
And it's this umami receptor he's focusing on to help people enjoy vegetables.
You can enhance, say, sweetness with less sugars using umami. You can enhance saltiness with less salty, also using umami. And what is actually maybe most important when it comes to the green transition is that if you can dial on the umami bottom, your perception of bitterness goes down without removing the bitter compounds. So in a way, it's sort of the magic cure for the green stuff.
But Ole is not suggesting we coat all veg in soy sauce or parmesan, rather that we use our understanding of umami to alter that bitterness into something more palatable to more people.
We know which compounds in the food elicit umami, and it's a magic of interplay between two different kinds of substances. One comes from breakdown of proteins, in particular an amino acid called glutamic acid or glutamate, also called the third spice. That is the basic of umami, and it can be a very strong signal. For instance, what you have in the inside of a tomato or in a very ripe cheese. But the magic is that the umami receptor, and we know this in detail, when it binds glutamate, it can also bind other things at the same time. And when these other things are bound, the umami just blows your mind.
If, like me, you enjoy eating all vegetables, bitter or not, it might be a bit hard to understand why this umami is necessary. But most of us have at least one vegetable we can't bear. I'm married to a chicory endive hater. Too bitter, he says. And you can only imagine if you felt like that about all vegetables. And that's the big crowd Ole is working to convert. And he's figured out how to do it.
This is a piece of seaweed that has been simmered in soy sauce. It's called konbu. In Japanese cuisine, they use this to just put on top of the rice. You put it on your tongue and just suck on it, and you will find immediately it's salty. That's the first basic taste out of the 5 basic tastes you got. It's salty because it's from the ocean, and it's soy sauce, a lot of salt. And then there's something very slowly sort of developing.
But it's quite sweet.
It's quite sweet, yes. But there's no sugar in it.
There is this now sort of thicker, mature, I don't know how to describe it, a more mature taste.
So this is the difficulty with umami. What is it you're feeling now? It's something that is really round.
Yes, it's round and thick.
If you ask kids how does this taste, they say noodle cup. And that's because what's in the soup, in the noodle cup, it's these compounds you now get from the soy sauce and the seaweed. That's glutamate.
It's a very satisfying taste, and it sort of fills your whole mouth.
When you say satisfying, that's actually very important, because if you want to cut down on meat, you have to find pleasures in eating green without feeling that you're missing something.
So the Japanese discovered this, heaven knows,
This is part of a whole arsenal of what they call furikake, or condiments, that you put on green dishes. It could be rice, but also vegetables. And so these are little umami bumps, if you wish. And the point is that you need very little to kick a green dish.
Western cuisines, of course, also have their own umami bombs. Think Worcestershire sauce, Marmite, tomato ketchup, and an ingredient in the next experiment he set up, fish sauce.
What I've got here is the outermost leaves of a coned cabbage, and it's very green. It's also signal it has some bitterness, and I like bitterness, and you probably also like bitterness. But all the other 8 billion people do not like bitterness, either the children. So what I got here is
a test tube of brown liquid.
It has a Latin name. It's called meligar, and it's made by a 2,000-year-old recipe. You cannot even smell its fish sauce because the honey sort of covers up the fishy aromas. Really? Now this has sweetness, this has umami, salt and sour. And now I'll invite you to take a piece of cabbage, and I'll show you how to do it. I just dip the outermost tip of this. And now the condiment clings to it, and I bite off only that part I've dipped. And then I evaluate the taste. And when I've done with that, I'll eat the rest. And then you can tell the difference. That's the point. So first do it with my condiment.
It's a very nice taste.
So this is, it's
quite interesting. The second half, it is amazing, yeah.
So
bitterness, second half, definite bitterness.
And it's
strong bitterness. None at all in the first half.
Also known in other food cultures, if you have Thai or Cambodian food, the sauces they make, they also use fish sauce, and then they may use sweet wine, in Japan, Mirian sweet wine, or sugar. So it's the same phenomenon.
The final experiment is a bit more sciencey.
So now we have the third tasting, where we release the green's inbuilt own potential to taste sweet and umami. And we're doing that by using a mold called Coty, Ascobillus oryzae. It's the same mold that has been used to turn soybeans into miso or soy sauce. And what this mold has, it has some enzymes that can break down proteins so you get umami, and you break down carbohydrates so you get sugars and sweetness. This is the stem of broccoli. Try to take this. It's been sitting in this mold for 3 days. And you should also notice that the crispness is conserved here because it's not heat treated. And it has got sweetness and it's got umami.
The sweetness is quite overwhelming in a way.
Yeah. And that's from the action of the enzymes in the mold. It sounds complicated to have a mold, but this is actually a condiment called shiu Coty, which has been becoming more and more fashionable to use. It's a condiment where you have this mold that has been growing on rice, and then salt has been added, the mold is dead, so there's no microorganisms working, but the enzymes are still active. So you can now buy it in the bottle and just add it to vegetables. I mean, it's so easy to do, and this is all just happening in a plastic box or pouch.
Absolutely fascinating.
And you can do it with all sorts of cabbages. I also sometimes do this with Chinese radish. That can be quite tough because it can be very bitter. This will also make it mild and good.
And nutritionally, because people worry about that, it's the same as the broccoli.
It's probably better because the enzyme action is really like a pre-digestion. It's a way of unlocking both the taste and also unlocking the access to the nutrients.
Sort of, it's one of those win-win-win-win-win situations. Have you done these experiments with children?
Oh, yes. I quite often use broccoli to show the power of these techniques, and the kids always like it. So I claim I can get every kid to eat broccoli.
Ole G. Moritzen, Professor of Gastrophysics at the University of Copenhagen. His latest book, Plant Forward Cuisine, is a guide for home cooks, but also a how-to for any policymakers, governments, charities, and food manufacturers pushing us toward eating more plants. Which brings up the question, after so much concentration on organic production and consumption in the country for so many years, what effect is this plant move having on organic sales? Well, back to Trine Krebs, green chef and organic farmer.
Right now, we're standing here with this 11.6% of the market being organic and the farmland. And we actually have a goal about being 30% in 2030. and nothing is really pushing it right now because politicians and a lot of people in power is so concerned about climate and so concerned about plant eating that we're kind of forgetting all the other values that we have to take in consideration when we are dealing with farming. And that's biodiversity, that's the loss of life in our fjords and the sea, and actually the fjords are dying right now in Denmark. That's about acidity of the land, that's about fertile soil in the future. So all these is kind of forgotten right now. It's the perfect storm right now.
I mean, one of the great discussions in Britain now is around regenerative farming, but there's no clear definition. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of organic farmers are feeling like we have to live by very strict rules, and you can just call yourself regenerative. Yeah. Is that being reflected in Denmark?
It's the total same situation in Denmark, and it's a part of the perfect storm I was talking about, the recession, the war thinking, and then the regenerative is putting organic against the wall. Our agenda is looking at the whole organism, the whole way around, taking it all in consideration from animal welfare to the quality of vital food for people and the planet and the fertile soil in the future. So it's very hard that this big term of regenerative is like swiping off every discussion. Hey, we can just be regenerative. And I will say there's a lot of very progressive farmers working with regenerative farming in Denmark. So I don't want to push them away. But then there's the other way around where we really have some big companies greenwashing like I never saw anything like it.
Trine Krebs. But what does all this change feel like to cooks, citizens, consumers?
Well, should I prepare one if you want to see it?
On our final evening in Copenhagen, we were invited to dinner at the home of keen cook and food writer Heidi Svolmacher.
I'm cooking the same two main ingredients reversed. So one version savory and one sweet. Apple and rye bread are the two that reoccur in both dishes.
And they both worked beautifully. Heidi shops carefully, but I wondered how much organic production now mattered to her.
I think it's become much less simple because there are so many different considerations when buying organic or conventional. One simple example is I prefer to buy organic dairy, but for a period I noticed my organic cream went off quickly. And so then it becomes a consideration between, do you want a cream where you actually finish the whole cream and use the resource to its fullest, or do you buy one that's produced under different conditions? So that's just one little query I found myself having when trying to shop for groceries. And there are many such considerations. You know, do you buy local but maybe not organic? Do you buy organic but from Italy? There's a flavor discussion. Sometimes the organic one is not necessarily the sweetest orange. Yeah. I want to be inspired by the ingredients I buy so that I actually also end up using them.
So of this delicious dinner this evening, what was organic?
Apples, sugar, vanilla, cream, not the rye bread, not the bacon. Some of the flour was, there are 3 flours in this. One of the flours in the focaccia is organic. The 2 others are not. So, yes.
It was all very good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Heidi.
You're welcome.
I've had a great time in Copenhagen and understood something about a country where food matters. But those contradictions Heidi feels while grocery shopping are at the heart of what's happening on a much bigger scale.
We have a huge monoculture, big ag industry in this country that takes up most of the land, and many people who are questioning why can't we have a real discussion about that.
We began this second Copenhagen program with Trine Hahnemann of the organic hot dog stand by the base of the 16th century round tower in the centre of the city. On our last day, we met again. This time, she was on her way to the airport for a flight to Italy. Producer Natalie Donovan and I were wrestling with what we'd learned over 4 days and many interviews. In fact, of course, the same questions that Trine has been wrestling with for decades, but as a player, a cook, caterer, consultant, activist, writer, and keen observer in the fight to improve food in Denmark.
Denmark is such an adaptable country. Every time an industry disappears, we come up with something new. We have very low unemployment. And I think the organic part and the regenerative and the bofællesskaber where people live together and all of that, I think I'm very proud that it's there and we're looking at it and we're working like that. But I think we need to have much more. We did not have the courage to make Denmark into a place where we could explore organic 100%. That could have been fun because we could have done that because we are such a small country.
And yet, you have a government that's just come up with this tripartite policy on trying to get people to eat less meat, to eat more vegetables, and has had these organic goals, which coming from another country seems rather remarkable.
Yeah, we did change the recommendations for eating less meat. That was not without a battle. But at the same time, I don't think they have done enough to reach the climate goals of getting the emission down. But I think the most important thing is we need more wilderness, and we need to look at that.
I mean, you now spend some time in Italy. How do the two food cultures compare as far as you see them?
I think Italy have some of the same problems as we have, but there's one big thing that I enjoy immensely, and that is in Denmark, as soon as we talk about the high-end supermarkets or good produce, organic, we have somebody who comes and shout elitist right away. And I think that is such a big mistake because good food is for everybody. And that is one thing about Italy. Everybody, knows what it means to eat well. So I think there's a different way of seeing that good food is such an important part of your everyday life, and everybody agrees on that.
Everyone agrees on that, Trine Hahnemann. Well, we do. Thanks for listening. I hope that cheered and cast light. It was produced by Natalie Donovan in the Bristol offices of the BBC and presented by me, Sheila Dillon, who sometimes makes it to our Bristol headquarters, but often just beavers away in North London.
Hi, we're the Van Tullikens, the identical twin Dr. Van Tullikens, Chris and Zand. In What's Up, Docs, we're diving into the messy, complicated world of health and well-being. We are living in the middle of what I would call a therapeutic revolution, but it can sometimes be hard to know what's really best for us. Do I need to take a testosterone supplement? How can I fix my creaky knees? Why do I get hangry? Is organic food actually better for me? We're going to be your guides through the confusion. We'll talk to experts in the field and argue about what we've learned and share what we've learned. And maybe disagree a fair bit too. No, we won't. What's Up, Docs from BBC Radio 4. Listen now on BBC Sounds.